Hey, and welcome to the limited and only episode of Noah's new podcast called I don't have a name for it yet, and that's not the name. Now that's the name, isn't it? I don't have a name for it yet. That's not the name. You know, it's more catchy than something. Probably, it's probably better than something, name-wise. So, you know. Yeah, but this is my little podcast episode that I decided would be kind of fun to make. It's not really a podcast because you're watching me, but it's okay. And I have a prop that I'm going to use later. But don't sue me or something, alright? It's a podcast, I promise. Just imagination. You know, it's a vignette, so it's a podcast. You know, that's kind of how that works. I think something like that. Harry, don't yell at me. Don't get mad. It's a podcast, alright? That's also a vignette. It's a part of it. It's a new term for something. Anyway, so yeah, this is my little podcast about mathematics, my old journey with it, and how I now understand it versus what I used to think of it. So, looking back at mathematics, the entirety of my existence, and I think most people's existences, when we're taught it in school, it's thrown at us like this thing, right? It's thrown at us like numbers and shapes and symbols, but there's a lot of things they just expect you to accept about it. Things that I think are never explained out of the fear that we ourselves won't understand them. And if we got too caught up in the ideas of understanding how mathematics is made, well, then how would we understand mathematics in the first place? But to be honest, I think that idea in school is about as much of a misstep as the Electoral College. I mean, we tried to make things better, but in the end it made things more confusing and a little less fair to anyone. I mean, if you're trying to understand something, but you're just told to accept it, those of us who are extremely curious often struggle with that because we're told to accept something that a lot of times our teachers themselves can't understandably explain, at least not on a basic level. Because when you're neglected to be taught something at an extremely basic level, that never goes away if you can't derive it yourself. And I think for almost all of us, the idea of deriving the entire concept of mathematics on our own is, well, it's a daunting task. I mean, hey, if you're Newton or something, I don't know, next Isaac Newton watching this, are you in Grandy Honours? You could be. We're at Mines. I wouldn't be that surprised, to be honest. But anyway, here's what I know about mathematics now versus what I used to know. So, what is the concept of a number? Now, as daunting as this sounds, it can be quite simple, but there is some ambiguity to it, which is one of the interesting things. But I think the first way we should explore numbers is through the idea of a bijection. Now, in mathematics, we have something called sets. And sets is commonly how we express any form of number. Sets are a list of numbers, and list is extremely loose. I'm not talking about anything crazy here. I'm saying let's say you have a piece of paper and you're writing numbers on it. Like it's a list. It is so basic and kind of up to interpretation. You could have brackets around it. You could have squiggles on the sides. You could just write numbers with no commas in between, but it does have numbers in it. And we're getting into what numbers are, so right now we are missing a tiny bit of information, but we will get into that. Now, the first thing I'm going to have is this board right here. Now, this is one of my vignettes that I called the bijection board. To my knowledge, there isn't really something like this that exists, at least not for a mathematical display purpose. But if I was a teacher, maybe I'd make something like this. I don't know. It was sort of where I got the idea. Now, I don't plan on being a teacher, but, you know, hey, maybe I should be one. Maybe it's my calling. I don't really know. But, so right here is my bijection board. Now, while you see that all of these shapes are quite different, they all have one very unique and specific property to them. Not really unique, actually, it's common, but, well, we're getting to that. And that is their height. The height of all of these objects is exactly the same. And to illustrate that, and the fact that it truly doesn't really matter in this scenario, I've made this little wave to slide across the top of it. And as you can see, slides across quite well. Sorry, that's probably annoying on the mic, but I made it out of plastic, and I didn't decide that felt was a good idea. It would sort of mess up the display, so I didn't put felt on it, so it's sort of loud. I'm sorry. It'll just be bad for the video, really. But as you can see, all of these objects have the same height. And that in itself is mildly interesting, right? All of these objects are different shapes, different sizes, and yet their effect in this scenario is the same to each other, which is quite interesting. But this is where the idea of our little set comes in. So let's take up our little piece of paper or whatever you were writing on. Maybe you're imagining it like I am right now. And let's just simply, for this first row, let's just make a mark for each one. Make one mark here, make another mark here, another mark here, another mark here, another mark here, and another mark here. Now, each of those marks represents one of these objects. And the only thing we care about for now is that they share size. That is the only quality for this consideration. I mean, yeah, sure, some of them are different shapes. In fact, almost all of them are. But their size is the same. So that's what each of those marks represent. It represents same size, same size, same size, same size, same size. I think that's 5, right? Same size, same size, same size. Yeah, it's 5. And this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This has 6. So add one more to that. Sorry. I mean, if you were mad at me for the inconsistency, it's fair. But yeah, so each of those marks represents one single guy with quality. Yeah, sorry, great sentence there. This is not scripted. And now I want for each of those, I want you to draw a little squiggle below each of those tally marks. I hope you left room for that. If you didn't, and I should have told you that earlier, but it's okay. It's okay. Write your squiggles below it or anywhere on the paper, but just make sure it's clear which line they go to, right? Now, each of those squiggles, the only important part for them is that they all have to look different to you, or to be understandably different to you. Each of those little lines or squiggles or whatever you're putting below your marks should be different. Now, after you do this, I am going to ask you to make a little bit mathematic, and I'm so sorry about this, but it's kind of the best way to describe it. So this is where we get set theory in. Set theory is about to come in. You just made your own set. It's going to be awesome. So next, to below each of your squiggles, I want you to make a little dash, or sorry, a comma, next to each of your squiggles. You're just dividing them off, right? So squiggle one, first squiggle you made, second squiggle you made, third squiggle. I'm making these into sets. It's just hard. It's part of human language, but hopefully you did that, right? So next to each one, make a comma. Don't make a comma after the last one. Now, after you've done that, we're going to make these weird little brackety guys. They're going to go down like this, boom, 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 boom. Those are the brackets we most commonly use for set notation. And if you've made both of those on the outside, you've just made a mathematics set. Now, the important part of mathematics is that each one of those has a bijection with the mark you just made, but specifically counting all the ones that came before it. So that means your first squiggle has a bijection solely with the first mark. Your second squiggle has a bijection with the 2 marks before. Your third has a bijection with all of those other marks. Your fifth, the ones before it, etc. And that's the concept of numbers. They are all context-based and based off of that same set. Without each other, they wouldn't exist, but because of each other in this context, they do exist. This is the context of bijection, and if you were to replace all of those squiggles you just made with numbers from 1 through 6, you would find that it's the same result. And this is how mathematics was essentially first derived. A lot of the times it was less thought of like this, and it was Egyptians. They would use different hieroglyphics to represent, or different tally counts, I guess, to represent, and with hieroglyphics above them to represent the like sum total of some grain in a warehouse / silo. I don't really remember what they called them. And older like civilizations, they would use mathematics like this. This is how they would have, just sort of how mathematics was originally derived, was a lot of the times because we have things that were the same, and to humans it just made sense, right? We have 2 things that are the same. We have 2 grapes. This is not something Egyptians grew, I know, but hey. We have 2 grapes. Or is it something Egyptians grew? I'm so sorry. This is the part I don't know that much about. My Egyptian agriculture knowledge is really bad. It's pretty bad. They had figs, right? That sounds like something they would have back then. I just don't know my plants very well, I'm sorry. But regardless of which, with what they had, the idea there is that they would take those things and they would just label them with tallies, and eventually those tallies started to have more significance, because when you had 5 tallies in a row, you would sort of start to associate that with one thing, and that's where numbers sort of came about. We started counting things that appeared similar, that were noticeably similar to us, and eventually we started to notice we could count qualities. And once we started to notice we could count qualities, we came around with things like the Egyptian cubit, which was one of the first documented measuring devices, which was based off of the pharaoh's arm. And if you didn't go and get your cubit measured with the pharaoh's arm, you get killed. But the point is that all of our measuring systems came from this idea of bijection, long before we knew what bijection was. It's sort of like which came first, the chicken or the egg, but we certainly know it wasn't the chicken, it was the chicken, it definitely wasn't the egg. Like, we know that we started labeling things long before we really even knew they had similar qualities. We just knew that it kind of made sense. And that's the idea of bijection in itself. And I hope this lesson was a little bit helpful, because this is sort of how mathematics works in the real world. In fact, it is how mathematics works in the real world. So I hope you found this little episode of Noah's podcast helpful. I hope it helped you think about math in a way that you hadn't before, or at least, I don't know, humor you a little bit as I stumble through my own understanding of set theory and bijections before I've even taken a class remotely similar to anything like that. But yeah, I hope it was informative. I hope it was fun or interesting. Not the most boring 11 minutes of your life if you watch this whole thing. Thank you, Harry or CJ or whatever TA is being forced to take 11 minutes of their time to watch this. So if you made it to the end, thank you so much. Sub to the channel would be nice. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. I will see you on the flip side. Just kidding. It just sounded so outro-y I had to say it.